Alright, hey guys. So last week we were taking a close look at historical text, right? And those often include a lot of dates that are in order, and we learned that when readers are making their way through an historical text and encountering all those dates and the order that different things happened, it can be kind of overwhelming to remember all the information. Well, just like in a historical text, now we're going to be introduced to something a little bit different. You can see right up here at the top, these are called technical text. So when you are encountering a technical text, these are more like sometimes science-based, but sometimes it's just that they give you procedures or steps to follow. But there's usually like a sequence. And when you are encountering these texts and reading them, sometimes it's also really good to think about like what's happening in the text and why is that happening. Maybe it's a step that you're doing. So like what step are you taking right now and why are you taking it? Examples of technical text include, take a look, how to make a smashamole. I guess, I don't know, I call it guacamole, but that's right, a recipe. So a lot of you have encountered technical text more often than you know, but today and throughout this week we're going to take a look at some technical and then some scientific text to really pay attention to what's happening in the text and why it's happening. So I'm going to move over to part 2 of this video in a split screen where I share with you an example of a technical text and a really great way for readers to take notes as they're reading so that they can better understand what's happening and why is it happening. Okay, so we are in part 2 of the video. Now you can see my split screen. I have the text over here. It's called Making a Rhino Bank. And then I have this note-taking tool, this graphic organizer over here. This probably looks familiar. It's the same basic graphic organizer you used when you were reading the text Model T about Henry Ford's car. So just as a reminder, I'm going to read this to you guys and I want you to follow along. Good readers often stop and think about what is happening in a technical text and why. Why do we do this? Well, it helps readers to better understand these texts. Typically, these texts give a lot of information and often in steps. This can be a lot to process and comprehend if we don't stop and think about what's happening and why. So I'm going to model reading through this text and how I would use this as a note-taking tool. So let's start. Now we're over here at the text and just follow along. Lots of people have piggy banks. Here's how to make something different. A rhino bank. You will need a round balloon, newspaper torn into strips, a large bowl of paper mache, if I didn't know how to pronounce it, paper mache paste, cardboard tubes from paper towels or toilet paper, and some masking tape. Okay. Part 1. I can see now the steps. Blow up the balloon and tie a knot. Cut the cardboard tube into 4 short lengths and tape them to the balloon as legs. Roll some newspaper into the shape of a cone and tape it to the front of the balloon as a horn. Make sure the form looks like a rhino, not a pig. This is, after all, a rhino bank. So now I'm going to come over here into the what happened. So I'm thinking about part 1. I can even put part 1 here just to remind myself. So if I were completing this graphic organizer, I might write something like attach 4 short legs to the balloon, and let's see, what did they say? The newspaper into the shape of a cone, and newspaper in shape of a cone. Again, not writing down every little detail. Why? Okay, so now I need to think to myself, why do we do this? This creates the body of the rhino for the rhino bank. Now I know that's the purpose of doing that. I'm going to skip down a couple lines. Now I'm going to read part 2. So far I have a pretty good idea what's going on here. I could probably make a rhino bank right now if I followed part 1. Part 2. Dip 1 strip of newspaper into the paper mache paste. Use your fingers to squeeze extra paste back into the bowl. Okay. Then Then stick the pasted strip over the balloon and smooth it down. Continue dipping and placing strips one at a time until you have completely covered your creation. Do not use any more paste than is necessary. If there is too much paste, the strips will not lie flat and might not stick to each other. Ooh, okay. So, what am I going to do, or what is happening in part 2? This was all about adding those strips. I can see right here. Stick the pasted strip over the balloon and smooth it down. So add the pasted strips to the balloon. But there was a major part here, and that was, it kept saying, like, use your fingers to squeeze the extra paste back into the bowl. So I'm gonna go back in the text. Why, like, what was it saying about that? Do not use more paste than necessary. Okay, so add the pasted strips to the balloon and do not use too much paste. I'm just putting it in my own words. I like to keep it simple. Now I'm going to come over here and think about why. Well, what did they tell me right here at the very end? If there is too much paste, the strips will not lie flat and might not stick to each other. It's going to be really hard to make this if they're not sticking to each other. So why? If you use too much, the strips might not stick to each other. Again, not overcomplicating this. Let me go down now to part 3. After 24 hours, the paste will be dry and the shape will harden. Have an adult cut a coin slot in the top with a knife. The balloon will pop. I guess if it was in there, you wouldn't be able to put your money in, would you? You can paint and decorate your rhino bank if you want. A rhino bank is much better than a piggy bank. That's your opinion. But, more importantly, let's go to part 3. I just have to understand this text, right? So, wait 24 hours. Now I could even come over here. If it's easier for you to think about one thing and then come over here and think about the why, the shape will harden. Now I could come back over here and think about, okay, what was something else I learned in part 3? Have an adult cut a coin slot in the top with a knife. Why? So the balloon will paint. So right here I might say, I might skip a line, or I could just add to that. Have an adult cut a coin slot. And why do we do that? Well, there's really 2 reasons. One that's stated and one you have to infer or use your background knowledge to make a decision about. So why would you cut the coin slot? To create the, it would help if I could spell that right, the bank, and also to pop the balloon inside. So that is using this graphic organizer as a note-taking tool to help me better understand. Now, I think that I have a really great idea about how I could go about making a rhino bank. I really do feel confident that I understand this text. And in part 3, the final part of this video, I'm going to go through and answer 2 multiple choice questions about this text. All right, this is part 3, the last part of our teacher video from Tuesday, and we just finished reading and taking notes using that graphic organizer for the text Rhino Bank, and now we have 2 multiple choice questions. So let's take a look. In part A, the question is, which statement best explains why you need to use a balloon? So what is the purpose for the balloon? Is it A, the balloon holds the rhino's shape while the pasted piece is dry? Well, I know that that part is true because I remember in my graphic organizer, I wrote, what do? We create the rhino body with the balloon and those pieces for the legs, and then even the newspaper to create the horn. Let's look at answer choice B. The pasted newspaper will only stick to a balloon. It didn't indicate in the text that that's why we use the balloon. I thought it was more to create the body. Let's look at answer choice C. The balloon makes the bank look like a rhino and not like a pig. No, they told us to really make sure the shape looked more like a rhino and not a pig, but that was kind of up to us. And then letter choice D, the balloon will keep the newspaper strips from getting too much paste on them. No, that's your fingers. You have to like wring out those strips to get rid of any of that excess paste. So the best answer is going to be A, and we know that has to do with keeping that shape while it hardens. Let's look at part B. Underline one sentence from part 3. So underline one sentence, so just one. From part 3. They've included part 3 here for me. That best supports your answer to part A. So that idea about the rhino keeping its shape using the balloon. If it helps you to write notes like this on like a reading test or a reading assignment, you absolutely can. I encourage students to do that. So now let's look. Part 3, after 24 hours, the paste will be dry and the shape will harden. That makes sense because it's going to harden in the shape of the balloon. But let's continue. Have an adult cut a coin slot in the top with a knife. No, because that's not really why you use the balloon. The balloon will pop. That doesn't really indicate why we're using it though. You can paint and decorate your rhino if you want. That has nothing to do with the balloon. A rhino bank is much better than a piggy bank. That has nothing to do with the balloon. So the best answer is going to be this sentence right here about the shape hardening. So those are your multiple choice questions, guys. Today on your own, you are going to read a text about floating and sinking liquids. It has to do with creating a hydrometer and talking about the density of liquids. It is a technical text, and I have completed part of the graphic organizer for you, and you have to complete the why portion. After you complete that, you are going to answer 6 multiple choice questions from that text. Let me know if you have any questions.